The little girl stood quietly near the edge of the sidewalk, her feet barely touching the ground as she shifted her weight from side to side. She was only 9 years old, wearing an oversized hoodie that once belonged to someone much taller. In her small hands, she held an old acoustic guitar, scratched, faded, and clearly loved. A piece of cardboard lay at her feet. Written in uneven handwriting were the words, "Guitar for sale, 100 die." People passed by without slowing down. Some glanced at the guitar and kept walking. Others smiled politely, assuming it was just a child's toy or a forgotten instrument with no real value. No one stopped long enough to ask why a girl so young was standing there alone, trying to sell something that looked far too heavy for her arms. When someone finally did pause, they asked the obvious question, "Where did you get this guitar?" The girl swallowed before answering. "It was my dad's," she said softly. Her voice was calm, but there was something fragile beneath it. The kind of quiet that comes from saying the same painful sentence too many times. She explained that her father used to play the guitar every night, sometimes in the living room, sometimes sitting on the edge of her bed. Music was how he relaxed. Music was how he laughed. Music was how he showed love when words were hard. Then she added the part that made people look away. "He passed away," she said. The guitar was the last thing he left behind. She wasn't selling it because she wanted to. She was selling it because she thought she had to. Her mom had been stressed lately. Rent, groceries. The girl didn't fully understand the numbers. She only knew money helped, and this guitar was the only thing she had that might be worth something. "Why 100?" someone asked. She shrugged. "That just sounds like a lot," she said. To her it was. To the world rushing past her it was almost nothing. As the afternoon sun dipped lower, her arms grew tired. She adjusted her grip, hugging the guitar closer to her chest, not like an item for sale, but like a memory she wasn't ready to let go of. And she didn't notice the man who had stopped a few steps away, dressed simply, quiet, watching, listening. What she didn't know was that this moment, this small innocent decision, was about to change her life forever. As the minutes passed, the sidewalk grew busier. Footsteps echoed around the little girl, some fast, some slow, but almost all of them kept moving. The cardboard sign stayed in the same place. The guitar stayed in her arms, and her hope, small to begin with, started to feel heavy. A man finally stopped. He crouched down slightly, peering at the guitar like it was an object, not a memory. "Why so cheap?" he asked. The girl tightened her grip. "I just need $100. He chuckled. "That thing's old. Probably doesn't even play right." Without waiting for a response, he stood up and walked away. She watched him disappear into the crowd, her eyes lingering for a moment longer than they should have. Then she looked back down at the guitar, brushing her fingers over the worn wood where her father's hand used to rest. Another person stopped, a woman this time. "You shouldn't be selling this," the woman said. "You'll regret it." The girl nodded politely but didn't answer. She'd already thought about that. Every night, every morning. Regret was already there. It had been there since the day her father didn't come home. A group of teenagers passed by, laughing loudly. One of them pointed at the sign. "Only $100, he said. "I'll give you 20. The others laughed. The girl didn't laugh back. She shook her head and whispered, "It's not for bargaining." They rolled their eyes and walked off, still joking. Her cheeks burned not with anger, but with embarrassment. She hadn't realized how exposed she was until that moment, standing in public with her grief laid out on cardboard for strangers to comment on. The guitar began to feel heavier. She shifted it from one arm to the other, trying not to drop it. The strap was frayed, barely holding together. Her fingers ached, but she didn't put it down. Setting it on the ground felt wrong, like abandoning something alive. A man in a business suit paused just long enough to glance. "Your parents know you're out here?" he asked suspiciously. "Yes, sir," she answered quickly, afraid he might think she was doing something bad. He nodded, unconvinced, and walked away without another word. Each rejection chipped away at her confidence. She started rehearsing the explanation in her head, making it shorter each time, hoping fewer words would hurt less.
"It was my dad's. He passed away."
"I just need $100. Her voice grew quieter with every retelling. A light breeze picked up, flipping the edge of her sign over. She bent down to fix it, the guitar slipping slightly as she did. For a brief moment, panic flashed across her face, the fear of dropping it, breaking it, losing it for good. She hugged it tightly again. Nearby, someone finally pulled out a phone. At first, the girl didn't realize she was being recorded. She was too focused on keeping herself together, too focused on standing there and doing what she believed was the right thing. A small crowd began to form, not because people wanted to buy the guitar, but because the scene itself was uncomfortable. A child, alone, selling something she clearly loved. Some whispered to each other, "That's sad. Where's her mother? Someone should help her." But most of them didn't move. Sympathy stayed where it was, in words, not actions. The girl glanced at the sun, now lower in the sky. She wondered how much longer she should stay. How long was trying hard enough before it was okay to give up? She thought about her mom at home, probably worrying. She thought about the envelope of bills on the table. She thought about the empty chair where her father used to sit, guitar resting against his knee. Maybe she was doing this wrong. Maybe she shouldn't have come at all. Her eyes stung, but she blinked quickly, refusing to cry. Crying would make people stare. Crying would make this real. Then a voice spoke, gentle, different from the others. "You've been very brave." She looked up. The same quiet man from earlier was standing closer now. No judgment, no smirk. Just calm eyes and a respectful distance. He wasn't looking at the sign, he was looking at her. And for the first time all day, she felt like someone truly saw her. The girl studied the man carefully. He didn't rush her. He didn't reach for the guitar. He didn't glance at the cardboard sign on the ground like everyone else had. Instead, he stood there patiently, as if time wasn't pressing on him the way it was pressing on her. "Thank you," she said quietly, unsure what else to say. He nodded, a small, understanding gesture. Up close, he looked ordinary, dark jacket, worn shoes, a cap pulled low. Nothing about him suggested importance. Nothing about him suggested he was different from the hundreds of people who had already walked past. Yet something felt different. He noticed how the guitar strap was fraying, how her arms trembled slightly under the weight, how she kept adjusting her grip, careful not to let the instrument touch the ground. "Is it heavy?" he asked. She hesitated. "A little. But it's okay." He smiled gently, not amused, just kind. "It's all right to rest," he said. "You've been holding it for a long time." She shook her head. "I don't want it to get dirty." The man crouched slightly, lowering himself so they were closer to eye level, but still leaving space, never crossing into her comfort. People nearby slowed down again, sensing something meaningful was happening. "Was your dad a musician?" he asked. Her fingers paused on the strings. "Yes," she said. "Happy ones. Sometimes sad ones too." Her voice wavered on the last part. He waited. "He said music could talk when people couldn't," she added. The man looked down at the guitar then, really looked at it. He traced the scratches with his eyes, the dents around the sound hole, the faded finish near the neck. "That guitar's been loved," he said. She smiled, the first real smile of the day. "He used to sit right there," she said, pointing to a spot in the distance, "and play until I fell asleep." The street noise faded around them. Conversations nearby quieted. Even the traffic seemed farther away. "What made you decide to sell it?" he asked, gently. She swallowed. "My mom's been worried," she said. "She doesn't say it, but I hear her crying at night. I just want to help." The man's jaw tightened slightly, a reaction so small most people would miss it. He nodded slowly. "That's very grown-up of you," he said. She shrugged. "I'm trying." A gust of wind blew again, flipping the corner of her sign. The man reached down and held it in place so it wouldn't fly away. He read it silently. "Guitar for sale, 100. He didn't comment on the price. Instead, he asked, "Does it still play?" Her eyes widened a little. "Yes, I think so." "May I hear it?" She froze. No one had asked that before. Everyone else had treated the guitar like an object, something to be evaluated, discounted, or ignored. But this man was asking to hear it, to listen. She looked down at the instrument, then back up at him. "It was my dad's," she said again, not as an explanation, but as a warning. He nodded. "I understand." She hesitated for several seconds, the crowd holding its breath with her. Then, slowly, she shifted the guitar in her arms and offered it to him. He accepted it carefully, like it was fragile, like it mattered. As he adjusted the strap, a few people leaned in closer. Phones rose higher. Whispers rippled through the small crowd. The man settled the guitar against his body, testing the weight, adjusting his grip until it sat comfortably. He didn't rush. He didn't show off. He brushed his fingers lightly across the strings. The sound wasn't perfect. The strings were slightly out of tune. But the note rang out clear and warm, alive. The girl's breath caught. She hadn't heard that sound in months. The man played a simple melody, slow, gentle, almost like a lullaby. Nothing flashy, nothing loud, just enough to let the guitar speak. People stopped talking completely now. Some closed their eyes. Others stared, unsure why their throats felt tight all of a sudden. The girl felt tears gather, but this time, she didn't fight them. For a moment, it felt like her father was there again, sitting beside her, smiling. The man finished the short tune and let the last note fade naturally into silence. He looked at her. "Your dad had good taste," he said softly. She nodded, wiping her eyes with her sleeve. She whispered, "He did." The man handed the guitar back just as carefully as he'd taken it. Then he asked the question that made her heart skip. "How much did you say you wanted for it?" The crowd leaned in, and somewhere behind them, someone whispered, barely loud enough to hear, "Wait, do you know who that is?" But the girl didn't hear that. All she saw was a stranger who had listened, truly listened, and a guitar that suddenly felt too important to let go. And the moment was about to change everything. The girl hugged the guitar close to her chest again, as if the music had reminded her why letting go felt so hard. $100, she said softly. The man didn't respond right away. He looked around slowly, not at the crowd, but at the faces. People who had stopped to watch. People who had whispered sympathy but kept their hands in their pockets. People who were now suddenly paying attention. He looked back at the girl. "That's a very small number," he said gently. She shrugged. "It's a lot to me." Before he could say anything else, the murmurs behind them grew louder. "That's him." "No way. It can't be." A woman in the crowd leaned toward her friend, eyes wide. "That's Ozzy Osbourne." Another person pulled up a photo on their phone, comparing it quickly. "It's him. That's definitely him." Phones rose higher. Recording angles shifted. What had been a quiet, emotional moment was now buzzing with disbelief. But the girl didn't notice. She was watching the man's hands, the way they still rested respectfully near the guitar, never touching without permission. He knelt down again, bringing himself level with her. "Do you know what this guitar really is?" he asked. She shook her head. "It's your dad's voice," he said. "It carries his hands, his songs, his love." Her lips trembled. "I don't want to sell it," she admitted. "I just thought I should." The crowd fell silent again. Someone whispered, almost in disbelief, "He's talking to her like she's the only person here." The man smiled softly. "Helping your family is important," he said. "But some things aren't meant to be traded." A man from the crowd finally spoke up. "Sir, do you know who you're talking to?" The girl turned, confused. The stranger gently raised his hand toward the crowd, a subtle signal to wait. "Let her finish," he said calmly. That alone sent another ripple through the onlookers. The girl looked back at him. "My dad used to say music was forever," she said. "But people aren't." The man swallowed. "He was right," he replied. "And that's exactly why this matters." The whispers intensified. "That's Ozzy, Black Sabbath, the Prince of Darkness." The irony hung in the air. A man known worldwide for darkness now kneeling in the daylight, speaking gently to a grieving child. Finally, someone stepped closer, unable to contain it any longer. "Excuse me," they said, voice shaking. "Are you Ozzy Osbourne?" The man sighed, not annoyed, just resigned, and nodded once. "Yes," he said quietly. The crowd exploded. Gasps. Hands over mouths. Audible disbelief. The girl's eyes widened, but she still didn't fully understand. She repeated. He smiled at her. "I play music too." The simplicity of it made people laugh through their tears. Cameras zoomed in. Someone shouted, "This is unbelievable." But Ozzy didn't stand. He didn't pose. He stayed exactly where he was, kneeling, eye level with the girl. "Listen to me," he said softly. "Your father's guitar doesn't belong in someone else's hands." He reached into his jacket and pulled out his wallet. "I won't buy this from you," he said. "Not for $100. Not for any price." The girl's heart sank for a split second. Then he continued, "I want to help you without taking this away." The crowd went silent again. Ozzy counted out bills, far more than the number written on the cardboard. "This is for your family." For food, for rent, for school. He gently folded the money and placed it in her hand, closing her fingers around it. The girl stared at the bills, then at the guitar, then back at him. "But the guitar?" she asked. Ozzy smiled, a smile full of understanding. "That stays with you," he said. "Because one day you might play it for someone else." Tears broke free. The crowd erupted, not with noise but with emotion. People wiped their eyes. Some applauded softly. Others simply stood there, overwhelmed. And in that moment everyone understood. This wasn't about a celebrity. It was about a little girl, a father's memory, and a kindness that no amount of money could ever measure. For a few seconds after Ozzy placed the money in the girl's hand, the world seemed to pause. The bills felt unreal, heavier than she expected, warmer too, like they carried something more than value. She didn't close her fingers right away. She just stared at them, confused, her mind trying to catch up with what had just happened. "I don't understand," she said quietly. "You said you wouldn't buy it." Ozzy nodded. "That's right." He gently nudged the guitar back toward her chest, making sure the strap sat properly on her shoulder. "This," he said, tapping the guitar lightly, "isn't something that should leave your family." Around them, the crowd had gone completely still. Phones were still raised, but no one spoke. It was as if everyone instinctively knew this was a moment not to interrupt. The girl hugged the guitar tighter. "But my mom," she began. "I know," Ozzy said softly. "And that's why I'm helping." He glanced around at the people watching, not with pride, not with expectation, but with a quiet seriousness. "There are times when money solves a problem," he said, "and times when it shouldn't cost you a memory." The words hit harder than any applause could have. A woman in the crowd wiped her eyes. A man cleared his throat and looked away. Someone whispered, "That's beautiful." The girl's lower lip trembled. "My dad would have liked you," she said. Ozzy smiled, but his eyes glistened. "I'd have liked him too." He reached out slowly, asking permission with his eyes before resting his hand gently on the guitar's headstock, not claiming it, just acknowledging it. "Do you play?" he asked. She shook her head. "He tried to teach me. I stopped when he got sick." Ozzy nodded. "That's okay. Music waits." The girl looked up at him. "Are you really famous?" The question broke the tension, and a few people laughed softly. Ozzy chuckled. "A little. But you don't act like it," she said. He leaned in slightly. "The guitar doesn't care who I am." That was the moment something shifted in the crowd. It wasn't just recognition anymore. It was understanding. This wasn't Ozzy Osbourne, the legend. This was a musician recognizing another musician's legacy, even if that musician would never be famous. Someone in the back finally spoke, voice shaky. "This is going to be everywhere." Ozzy glanced over his shoulder. "I hope not for me," he said. "I hope it's for her." The girl squeezed the money in her hand. "Can I really keep this?" she asked.
"Yes,"
Ozzy replied. "And if your mom asks where it came from, tell her it came from music." He stood up slowly then, the crowd parting instinctively to give him space. For the first time since arriving, his full presence was visible, the familiar face, the unmistakable voice, the history that followed him everywhere. Gasps rippled through the people who hadn't yet realized. "It's really him. I can't believe this." But Ozzy didn't stay in the center. He stepped back, giving the focus back to the girl. "Promise me something," he said, crouching one last time. She looked up, serious. "Promise you'll never think this guitar was only worth $100. She nodded firmly. "I promise." Ozzy smiled, satisfied. As he turned to leave,
"Someone called out, 'A picture!'"
he waved gently without stopping. "Today's not about me," he said. The girl watched him walk away, the guitar still resting against her heart, the money safely tucked in her pocket. She didn't fully understand what had just happened. But she knew one thing. She hadn't lost her father's guitar. She had just gained a story she would tell for the rest of her life. Ozzy had only taken a few steps when the reality of the moment finally caught up with the crowd. The whispering turned into soft cheers. Not loud, not chaotic. Just a wave of appreciation rolling through the people who had witnessed something rare and deeply human. The girl stood frozen, still clutching the guitar, watching the man disappear into the crowd. She looked down at the money again, then back at the empty space where he had been. "Mom's not going to believe this," she murmured. A woman nearby knelt beside her. "Sweetheart," she said gently, "you just met one of the greatest musicians in the world." The girl blinked. "Really?" The woman nodded. "Yes. And he didn't come here to be famous today." More people gathered closer now, their faces softened, no longer curious, but protective. A man stepped forward, holding his phone. "I caught the whole thing," he said. "Not to post, just so you'll always have it." The girl smiled shyly. Another voice spoke up from behind the crowd. "Excuse me." Everyone turned. A local reporter, microphone in hand, had arrived, drawn by the growing attention. "What just happened here?" she asked. Before anyone else could answer, "He listened," she said simply. That was all she needed to say. The reporter paused, clearly moved. "Can I ask your name?" She shared it quietly. "And your dad?" the reporter asked. The girl's voice wavered, but she answered anyway. He loved music, she said. That's all. The reporter nodded, lowering the microphone. That's enough. Across the street, Ozzy paused and glanced back once more. He saw the girl surrounded by people now, not strangers anymore, but witnesses who cared. He gave a small nod as if to say goodbye without words. Someone finally asked the question out loud. Is the guitar famous too? The girl smiled for the first time without sadness. It's my dad's. That answer spread through the crowd faster than any name ever could. Later that evening, the video surfaced online. Not edited, just raw. A child, a guitar, a quiet act of kindness. The comments poured in. This restored my faith in humanity. That's how legends behave. The real value was never the guitar. But what people didn't see was what happened after the cameras stopped. Ozzy called a friend. He asked about music teachers in the area, about youth programs, about how to help quietly without headlines. A week later, the girl received a package. Inside was a handwritten note. Music is a language of love. Keep listening. There were guitar strings, picks, a small tuner, and a promise not written but understood. She started lessons. Slow at first, painful on her fingers, emotional on her heart, but every note felt like home. Her mom cried when she heard the story, not from the internet, but from her daughter's voice. He didn't take it, the girl said. He gave it back. Months passed. The guitar stayed in the same family, not as something to sell, but as something that healed. And the world finally understood the truth of that day. Fame didn't walk up to that sidewalk, kindness did. And sometimes, that's louder than any song ever written. By the next morning, the video was everywhere. It didn't spread because of a flashy title or dramatic edits. It spread because people felt it. A 9-year-old girl, a battered guitar, a quiet moment of kindness in the middle of an ordinary day. Millions watched. And then they watched again. News outlets picked it up, but the headlines weren't about fame or money. They were about humility. Rock legend helps grieving child. Ozzy had asked for that. Protect her, he said simply. Online, the comments told their own story. This made me call my dad. That guitar carried a soul. Real legends don't need applause. But the most powerful impact wasn't on the internet. It was at home. The money Ozzy gave helped the family breathe again. Bills were paid. Groceries filled the fridge. Stress softened just enough for laughter to return to the house. The guitar stayed where it always had, in the corner of the living room. Only now, it wasn't silent. Every evening the girl practiced, slowly, carefully. Sometimes she messed up and laughed. Sometimes she stopped because the memories felt too heavy. Her mother never told her to stop. Your dad would love this, she said. At school, the girl didn't brag. She didn't even tell the story unless someone asked. When they did, she always ended it the same way. He didn't buy it, she'd say. He listened. Ozzy never made a public statement. No press release, no interview. When someone asked him about it months later, he shrugged. Music did what music does, he said. It connected people. The guitar eventually appeared in another video, years later. This time, it was in the girl's hands. She sat on a small stage at a local community event, fingers trembling but determined. The same worn wood, the same scratches, the same sound. When she finished playing, the crowd stood. Not because she was perfect, but because they understood. That guitar had never been for sale. It was a bridge between a father and a daughter, between grief and healing, between fame and humanity. The original video still circulates online. People still share it when the world feels too loud, too angry, too divided. It reminds them of something simple. Kindness doesn't need an audience, and legacy isn't built on what you take, but on what you leave behind. If you believe kindness can change a life, they happen quietly on a sidewalk with a guitar, a child, and a heart willing to listen.